is agreed to.
The other senators wish to vote. If not, by a vote of 57 ayes and 43 nays, the motion to reconsider the motion and invoke cloture on the nomination of Patricia Ann Millett is agreed to.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
I raise a point of order that the vote on cloture under Rule 22 for all nominations other than that for Supreme Court of the United States is by majority vote.
Under the rules, the point of order is not sustained.
I appeal the ruling. The chair and ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second?
Mr. President, parliamentary inquiry.
The Republican leader will state the parliamentary inquiry.
Is it correct that under the bipartisan provisions of S.Res. 15 adopted earlier this year, that post-cloture debate time on a district court nomination is limited to 2 hours before an up or down vote is required under the rules?
Pursuant to S.Res. 15 of the 113th Congress, post-cloture debate on district court nominees is limited to 2 hours.
Further parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
The senator will state it.
Is it correct that under the bipartisan provisions of S.Res. 15 adopted earlier this very year, that post-cloture debate time on any executive branch nomination other than those at the cabinet level is already limited to 8 hours before an up or down vote is required under Senate rules?
Pursuant to S.Res. 15 of the 113th Congress, post-cloture debate on any nomination to the executive branch, which is not a Level 1 position, is set forth in Title V, United States Code, Section 5312, is limited to 8 hours.
Nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There is a sufficient second.
Mr. President,
The Republican leader.
one other parliamentary inquiry. When the Senate's rules were amended and a new standing order on consideration of nominations was established earlier this year, the Majority Leader and I engaged in a colloquy to announce that no further rules changes would be considered unless under the regular order and through the action of the Senate Rules Committee. Would the Chair confirm that currently the rules of the Senate provide that a proposal to change the Senate rules would be fully debatable unless 2/3 of the senators present and voting voted to invoke cloture, which would mean 67 senators voting in the affirmative if all 100 voted?
The Republican leader is correct.
Further inquiry, it's my understanding that prevailing on an appeal of the ruling of the chair would change Senate precedent on how nominations are considered in the Senate and effectively change the procedures of application of the Senate rules. How many votes are required to appeal the ruling of the chair in this instance?
A simple majority of those voting is required.
A simple majority of those senators present and voting is required.
So I'm correct that overturning the ruling of the chair requires a simple majority vote.
The senator from Kentucky is correct. The Majority Leader has appealed from the decision of the chair. The question is, shall the decision of the chair stand as a judgment of the Senate? Yeas and nays are requested. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be a sufficient second. There is a sufficient second. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Aye. Ms. Ayotte.
Senators voting in the affirmative: Alexander, Ayotte, Barrasso, Blunt, Bozeman, Burr, Chambliss, Coates, Coburn, Collins, Corker, Cornyn, Crapo, Cruz, Fisher, Flake, Graham, Grassley, Hatch, Hoeven, Inhofe, Isaacson, Johans, Johnson of Wisconsin, Kirk, Lee, Levin, Manchin, McCain, McConnell, Moran, Murkowski, Paul, Portman, Pryor, Risch, Roberts, Rubio, Scott, Shelby, Thune, Toomey, Vitter, Wicker. Senators voting in the negative: Baldwin, Baucus, Begich, Bennett, Blumenthal, Booker, Brown, Cantwell, Cardin, Carper, Casey, Durbin, Feinstein, Franken, Gillibrand, Hagan, Harkin, Heinrich, Heitkamp, Hirono, Johnson of South Dakota, Kane, King, Klobuchar, Landrieu, Leahy, Markey, McCaskill, Menendez, Merkley, Murphy, Murray, Nelson, Rockefeller, Sanders, Schatz, Schumer, Shaheen, Stabenow, Tester, Udall of Colorado, Udall of New Mexico, Warner, Warren, Whitehouse, Wyden.
The Senate will be in order. The Senate will be in order. Are there other senators who wish to vote? If not, on this vote, the yeas are 48, the nays are 52. The decision of the chair is not sustained. The Republican leader.
Mr. President, I make a point of order that nominations are fully debatable under the rules of the Senate unless 3/5 of senators chosen and sworn have voted to bring debate to a close. Under the precedent just set by the Senate, cloture is invoked at a majority. Therefore, I appeal the ruling of the chair and ask for the yeas and nays.
The chair has not yet ruled. So under the precedent set by the Senate today, November 21st, 2013, the threshold for cloture on nominations, not including those to the Supreme Court of the United States, is now a majority. That is the ruling of the chair.
I appeal the ruling and ask for the yeas and nays.
The Republican leader appeals from the decision of the chair. The question is now, shall the decision of the chair stand as the judgment of the Senate?
Ask for yeas.
The yeas and nays requested. Is there a sufficient second? There is. The yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Ms. Ayotte. Senators voting in the affirmative. Baldwin, Baucus, Bekich, Bennett, Blumenthal, Booker, Boxer, Brown, Cantwell, Cardin, Carper, Casey, Coons, Feinstein, Franken, Gillibrand, Hagan, Harkin, Heinrich, Hirono, Kane, King, Klobuchar, Landrieu, Leahy, McCaskill, Merkley, Mikulski, Murphy, Murray, Nelson, Reid of Rhode Island, Sanders, Schatz, Shaheen, Stabenow, Tester, Udall of Colorado, Udall of New Mexico, Warner, and Wyden. Mr. Johnson, South Dakota, aye. Mr. Donnelly, aye. Mr. Reid of Nevada, aye. Senators voting in the negative. Alexander, Barrasso, Blunt, Bozeman, Burr, Chambliss, Coates, Coburn, Cochran, Collins, Cornyn, Crapo, Cruz, Enzi, Fisher, Blake, Graham, Grassley, Heller, Hoeven, Isaacson, Johans, Johnson, Wisconsin, Kirk, Lee, Levin, McCain, McConnell, Moran, Murkowski, Paul, Pryor, Rubio, Shelby, Thune, Toomey, Vitter, and Wicker.
The Senate will be in order. The Senate will be in order on this vote. The yeas are 52, the nays are 48. The Senate sustains the decision of the chair.
Mr. President, what is the
Majority Leader.
before the Senate?
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the nomination of Patricia Ann Millett of Virginia to be United States Circuit Judge for the District of Columbia Circuit, signed by 17 senators.
Mr. President, I ask
The yeas and nays. By unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call has been waived. And the question is it the sense of the Senate to debate on the nomination of Patricia Ann Millett of Virginia to be United States Circuit Judge for the District of Columbia Circuit shall be brought to a close upon reconsideration. The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule, and the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
On this vote, excuse me, on this vote, the yeas are 55, the nays are 43. 2 senators responded present. Upon reconsideration, the motion is agreed to.
Mr. President,
The Majority Leader.
I have 9 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They've been approved by me and Senator McConnell. I ask unanimous consent these requests be agreed to, and these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection, the unanimous consent agreement is agreed to.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
Senator from Iowa.
Mr. President, I want to take just a few minutes first to congratulate our leader, Senator Reid, for leading the Senate finally into the 21st century. That's the step that we've taken today. Thank you very much, Leader Reid, for your courageous action in making sure that the Senate can now work and get our work done. I've waited 18 years for this moment. In 1995, when we were in the minority, I proposed changing the rules on filibuster. I've been proposing it ever since. What's really happened is that this war has escalated, this war on both sides. I said at the time in 1995 that it was like an arms race, that if we didn't do something about it, the Senate would reach a point where we wouldn't be able to function. Well, I thought perhaps at that time, I thought my words were a little apocalyptic, but as it turned out, they weren't at all. And so this is a bright day for the United States Senate and for our country to finally be able to move ahead on nominations so that any president, not just this president, any president can put together his executive branch under our Constitution. A president should have the people that he or she wants to form their executive branch. Every senator here gets to pick his or her own staff. We don't have to have the House vote on it or anybody else. It's true of every member of the House or Senate. It's true of the judiciary, the third branch of government. They can hire their clerks or their staff without coming to us. And so now I think it's appropriate that any president can now form their executive branch with only 51 votes needed in the United States Senate, not a supermajority. So that is a huge step in the right direction. And now we can confirm judges of all the courts less than the Supreme Court, circuits and district court judges, again, with 51 votes, without this supermajority that's been filibustering for so long. Now, I listened to the Republican leader during the run-up to these votes, and he said that we were somehow going to break the rules. Break the rules to make a new rule. Well, we did not break the rules. With the vote that we just had, the Senate broke no rules. The rules provide for a 51-vote, non-debatable motion to overturn the ruling of the chair. We've done it many times in the past, many times in the past. So we did not break the rules, simply used the rules to make sure that the Senate could function and that we can get our nominees through. I like what the writer Gail Collins said in her column this morning in the New York Times about these rules changes. She's had a lot of good things there, but she talked about how we were calling it the nuclear option. And she proffered that, probably called that because some think changing the rules here is worse than nuclear war. But it's not. It's not. It's time that we change these rules. And the Republican leader earlier said it was the Democrats who started this. The Democrats started this. It reminds me of a schoolyard fight between a couple of adolescents. And the teacher's trying to break it up. And this kid says, no, he hit me first. No, the other one says, no, he hit me first. No, he stepped on my toe first. No, he got in my road first. Who cares who started it? It's time to stop it. Even if I accept the fact that Democrats started it, maybe they can prove that we did. Possible, way back when. Well, it's escalated. It turned from a punch here and a punch there to almost extreme fighting. It got to the point where we can't function. Just on nominations alone, we've had 168 nominations since 1949. I kind of picked that date because that's when all this filibuster stuff kind of really started. 168. 82 of those have been under this president. 82. So that's why I mean, it's not worth it to talk about who started this. Fine. If they want to say the Democrats started, I'll say fine, we started it. But it's escalated and gone beyond all bounds. As I said, in 1995, it's turned into an arms race. So it's time to stop it. And that's what we did this morning with this vote. We took a step in the right direction. In 2008, Norman Ornstein, who's a congressional scholar, wrote about the broken Senate, our broken Senate, how we couldn't function. But you can go back even beyond that. In 1985, my first year here, Senator Thomas Eagleton, my neighbor to the south, said that the Senate is now in a state of incipient anarchy. I think we had something like 20 or 30 filibusters in the Congress before that. So this has been escalating over a long period of time. And it was time to stop it. And that's what we did this morning. So I say this is a big step in the right direction. But now we need to take it another step further, and that is to change filibuster on legislation. We need to change it as it pertains to legislation. Now, for example, we just had the spectacle of a bill that I reported out of our committee, unanimous, Republicans and Democrats, passed the floor of the House unanimously, comes to the Senate. One senator held it up for 10 days, stopped everything for 10 days. And guess what? It finally passed by unanimous consent. Should one senator be able to stop things around here like that? So it's time to move ahead, to get rid of the legislature, at the same time to protect the right of the minority, to offer amendments that are relevant and germane, to debate them, and to have a vote on them. Not that they should win it, but the minority should be able to offer, debate, and have a vote on relevant and germane amendments to legislation. I proposed 18 years ago a formula that, quite frankly, was first proposed by Senator Dole many, many years before that. And that was on a cloture vote to end a filibuster. The first time had to be 60 votes. Then you could wait 3 days, file a new petition with the requisite signatures, and at that time you'd need 57 votes. And then, if you didn't have 57 votes, you could wait 3 more days, file a new petition on the same bill or amendment, and then it would require 54 votes. If you didn't have 54, then you would wait 3 days, file a new petition, then you needed 51 votes. So at some point, the Senate could act, the majority could act on legislation. But the minority would have the right to slow things down. To slow things down to, as Senator George Hoare said in 1897, and he said, to slow things down to give sober second thought to legislation here in the Senate. Sober second thought. Not to stop it, not to block it. Slow things down, yes. Give second thought. Maybe things shouldn't be rushed into. Understand that. Maybe things should be amended. The minority ought to have that right to offer those amendments. Not just spurious amendments, but amendments that are relevant and germane to the legislation. But ultimately, 51 should decide in this Senate on how we proceed, what we vote on, and the outcome of the vote. So I hope that the vote today leads the Senate to adopt such an approach in January of 2015. When the new Senate comes in, there'll be a new Congress. I hope at that point that the Senate, I won't be here for it, but I hope the Senate will then take that next step of cutting down on the blatant use of the filibuster on legislation. So if of the action just taken here today, here's what I predict. I predict the sky will not fall, the oceans will not dry up, a plague of locusts will not cover the earth, and the vast majority of Americans will go on with their lives as before. But I do predict that our government will work better. A president will be able to form an executive branch. Our judiciary will function better. And the U.S. Senate will be able to move qualified nominees through the Senate in a more responsible manner. So, Mr. President, this is a good day for the Senate, a good day for our nation. The Senate now enters the 21st century. And again, I congratulate Leader Reid for bringing the Senate forward. A courageous action. I compliment all my fellow senators who upheld that vote, upheld overruling the ruling of the chair, so that from now on we only need 51 votes to close debate and move nominations and judges through the United States Senate. I yield the floor.
The senator from Michigan.
I would just ask unanimous consent that after the senator from Iowa is recognized, and I believe he is going to be recognized, that I then be recognized for up to 20 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President,
The senator from Iowa.
we didn't have a chance to debate the change in rules, and we should have had. So I'm going to speak now on some things that I think should have been said before we voted. Not that it would have changed the outcome, but because we ought to know what we're doing before we vote rather than afterwards. So I'll spend a few minutes discussing what the majority leader just did on the so-called nuclear option. Unfortunately, this wasn't a new threat. Over the last several years, every time the minority leader has chosen to exercise its rights under the Senate rules, the majority has threatened to change the rules. In fact, this is the third time in just the last year or so that the majority leader has said that if he didn't get his way on nominations, he'd change the rules. Ironically, that's about as many judicial nominees as our side has stopped through a filibuster, 3 or so. Prior to the recent attempt by the president to simultaneously add 3 judges to the D.C. Circuit that aren't needed, Republicans had stopped a grand total of 2 of President Obama's judicial nominees. Not 10, as the Democrats had by President Bush's 5th term in office. Not 34, as one of my colleagues tried to suggest earlier this week. No, 2 have been stopped. And if you include the nominees for the D.C. Circuit, we've stopped a grand total of 5. Again, not 10 as the Democrats had done in 2005, not 34 as one of my colleagues tried to argue earlier this week, but 5. During the same time, we've confirmed 209 lower court Article 3 judges. That's a record of 209 judges approved to 5 that were not approved. So this threat isn't based on any crisis. There is no crisis. I'd note that today's Wall Street Journal editorial entitled D.C. Circuit Breakers, quote, "The White House wants to pack a court whose judges are underworked," end of quote, lays out a caseload pretty clearly. And I'd ask that this editorial be made a part of the record.
Without objection.
So this is about a naked power grab and nothing more than a power grab. This is about the other side not getting everything they want when they want it. Now, the other side claims that they were pushed to this point because our side objected to the president's plan to fill D.C. Circuit with judges that court does not need. But the other side tends to forget history. And I think history is something we ought to learn from. So let's review how we got here. After the president simultaneously nominated 3 nominees for the D.C. Circuit that aren't needed, a blatant political power grab in its own right, what did the Republicans do? Well, we did something quite simple. We said that we want to go by the rules that the Democrats set in 2006. We said we'd hold those Democrats to the same standard they established in 2006 when they blocked a nominee of Bush's by the name of Peter Keisler. So let's be clear about why the Democrats are outraged. Democrats are outraged because Republicans actually had the temerity to hold the other political party to a standard that they established. And because we did, because we insisted that we're all play by the same rules, they came right back and said, then we'll change the rules. The other side has said, in effect, we don't want to be held to the standards that we established in 2006. And not only that, but if you don't give us what we want, we're willing to forever change the Senate. And that's what happened today. Now we hear a lot of ultimatums around here, but this ultimatum is not run-of-the-mill. It's very different. It's different because this threat is designed to hold the United States Senate hostage. It's different because it's designed to hold hostage all of the Senate's history and traditions and precedents. It's different because, to be effective, it relies on the goodwill of senators who don't want to see the Senate as we know it destroyed, or as the constitutional writers intended. Now, I'd note that today's majority didn't always feel that way, the very way that we've seen expressed today. Not too many years ago, my colleagues on the other side described their fight to preserve the filibuster with great pride. For instance, in 2006, one of my colleagues on the other side said this way, quote, "The nuclear option was the most important issue I've worked on in my public life. Its rejection was my proudest moment as a minority leader. I emerged from the episode with a renewed appreciation for the majesty of Senate rules. As majority leader, I intend to run the Senate with respect for the rules and for the minority rights the rules protect," end of quote. In 2005, another of my Democrat colleagues had this to say, quote, "Today, Republicans," referring to when Republicans were in the majority, so I'll start the quote again. "Today, Republicans are threatening to take away one of the few remaining checks on the power of the executive branch by their use of what has become known as the nuclear option. This assault on our traditions of checks and balances and on the protection of minority rights in this Senate and in our democracy should be abandoned. Eliminating the filibuster by nuclear option would destroy the Constitution's design of the Senate as an effective check on the executive, end of quote. So you've had two quotes from Democrats in 2005, 2006, very strongly supporting the precedent or the Senate using the filibuster to protect minority rights. But then they were in the minority, now they're in the majority, and the tradition of the Senate doesn't mean much. I have another quote from late Senator Byrd, 2005, quote, "And I detest this mention of a nuclear option, the constitutional option. There is nothing constitutional about it, nothing," end of quote. But of course, that was way back then, just 6, 7 years ago, when today's majority was in the minority, and there was a Republican in the White House. Today, the shoe is on the other foot. Today, the other side is willing to forever change the Senate because Republicans have the audacity to hold them, the majority party of today, to their own standard. But why? Why would the other side do this? There clearly isn't a crisis on the D.C. Circuit. The judges themselves say that if we confirmed any more judges, there wouldn't be enough to go around. And it's not as if all of these nominees are mainstream, consensus picks, despite what the other side would have you believe that they are somewhat mainstream. Take Professor Pillar, for instance. She has written this about motherhood, quote, "Productive rights, including rights to contraception and abortion, play a central role in freeing women from historically routine conscription into maternity," end of quote. Now, is that mainstream? She has also argued this about motherhood, quote, "Anti-abortion laws and other restraints on reproductive freedom not only enforce women's incubation of unwanted pregnancies, but also prescribes a vision of a woman's role as mother and caretaker of children in a way that is at odds with equal protection," end of quote. Is that mainstream? And what about her views on religious freedom? She argued that the Supreme Court of Hosanna Tabor Evangelical Lutheran Church, which challenged the so-called ministerial exception to employment discrimination, represented a, quote, "substantial threat to American rule of law," end of quote. Now get this. After she says that, the Supreme Court rejected her view 9-0, and the court held that, quote, "it is impermissible for the government to contradict a church's determination of who can act as its ministers," end of quote. Do my colleagues really believe mainstream America thinks churches shouldn't be allowed to choose their own ministers? I could go on, but I hope you get the picture. The point is this: voting to change the Senate rules is voting to remove one of the last meaningful checks on the president, any president, and voting to put these views on this important court. So I ask again, why would the other side do this? It is nothing short of complete and total power grab. It is the type of thing that we've seen again and again out of this administration and their Senate allies. And you can sum it up this way: do whatever it takes. You can't get Obamacare passed with Republican support? Do whatever it takes. Pass it at 7 a.m. on Christmas Eve with just Democrat votes. If you can't get all of your side to support Obamacare, do whatever it takes. Resort to things like the Cornhusker kickback. You lose your 60th vote on Obamacare due to a special election. Do to whatever it takes. Ram it through anyway using reconciliation. The American people don't want to be taxed for not buying health care. Do whatever it takes. Tell the American people it isn't a tax, and then you argue in the court that it is a tax. The American people want to keep their health care. Do whatever it takes. Promise them, quote, if you like your health care, you can keep it, end of quote, and then issue regulations making it impossible. Your labor allies want out from under Obamacare. Do whatever it takes. Consider issuing them, labor, a waiver from the reinsurance tax. You can't find consensus nominees for the National Labor Relations Board. Do whatever it takes. Recess appoint them when the Senate isn't even in session. You can't convince Congress to adopt your gun control agenda. Do whatever it takes. Issue some executive orders. You can't convince moderate Democrats to support cap and trade fee increases. Well, do whatever it takes. Do the same thing through EPA regulation. Frustrated that conservative groups' political speech is protected under the First Amendment. Do whatever it takes. Use the IRS to harass and intimidate those same conservative groups. Frustrated when the court stands up for religious freedom and issues a check on Obamacare contraception mandate. Do whatever it takes. Stack the D.C. Circuit Court in your favor. Frustrated when the court curbs your power on recess appointments. Do whatever it takes. Stack the D.C. Circuit with your favorite appointees, people that are ruling in your favor. Worried that EPA's regulation on cap and trade fee increases might get challenged in the court. Do whatever it takes. Stack the D.C. Circuit in your favor. Frustrated because Senate Republicans have the nerve to hold you to the same standards you established during the last administration. Do whatever it takes. Change the rules of the United States Senate. That's what we have witnessed today. Nothing but an absolute power grab. The majority in the Senate and their allies in the administration are willing to do whatever it takes to achieve their partisan agenda. They know that there will be additional challenges to Obamacare. They know that if they can stack the deck on the D.C. Circuit, they can remove one of the last remaining checks on presidential power. But make no mistake, my friends on the other side will have to answer this question. Why did you choose this moment to break the rules, to change the rules? Why now? Why, when we're witnessing the collapse of this massive effort to centrally plan 1/6 of this wonderful nation's economy? Why, when millions of Americans are losing their health care? Why did you choose this moment to hand the keys to the kingdom over to the president, a president with less check on his authority? Because the fact of the matter is this: any vote to break the rules, to change the rules, is a vote to ensure Obamacare remaining intact. So, Mr. President, I'll conclude by saying this: changing the rules of the Senate in this way was a mistake. But if the last several years have taught us anything, it's that the majority won't stop making these demands. And if we can't give in If we can't give in to these constant threats, sooner or later you have to stand up and say, enough is enough. But if there's one thing that will always be true, it's this: majorities are fickle, majorities are fleeting, here today, gone tomorrow. That's a lesson that sadly most of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle haven't learned, for the simple reason that they've never really served a single day in the minority. So the majority has chosen to take us down this path. The silver lining is that there will come a day when roles are reversed. When that happens, our side will likely nominate and confirm lower court and Supreme Court nominees with 51 votes, regardless of whether the Democrats actually buy into this fanciful notion that they can demolish the filibuster on lower court nominees and still preserve it for Supreme Court nominees. I yield the floor.
Senator from Michigan.
Mr. President, first I would ask unanimous consent that after my remarks, the senator from Alabama be recognized.
Without objection.
Mr. President, in the past, a few Senate majorities, frustrated by their inability to get certain bills and nominations to a vote, have threatened to ignore the rules and to change them by fiat and to change rules to a majority vote change. Rule 22 of the Senate requires 2/3 of the Senate to amend our rules. A new precedent has now been set, which is that a majority can change our rules. Because that step would change the Senate into a legislative body where the majority can, whenever it wishes, change the rules, it has been dubbed the nuclear option. Arguments about the nuclear option are not new. Senator Arthur Vandenberg, confronting the same question in 1949, Senator Vandenberg, who was a giant of the Senate, one of my predecessors from Michigan, said that if the majority can change the rules at will, quote, there are no rules except the transient, unregulated wishes of a majority of whatever quorum is temporarily in control of the Senate, close quote. Now, Senator Vandenberg, when he took that position, was arguing against changing the rules by fiat, although he favored the rule change that was being considered. Overruling the ruling of the chair, as we have now done, by a simple majority is not a one-time action. If a Senate majority demonstrates it can make such a change once, there are no rules which binds a majority, and all future majorities will feel free to exercise the same power, not just on judges and executive appointments, but on legislation. We have avoided taking these steps in the past, these nuclear steps, but we've avoided them sometimes barely. I'm glad that we avoided the possible use of the nuclear option again earlier this year, when our leaders agreed on a path allowing the Senate to proceed to a vote on the President's nominees for several unfilled vacancies in his administration. But today, we are once again moving down a destructive path. The issue, Mr. President, is not whether to change the rules. I support changing the rules to allow a president to get a vote on nominees to executive and to most judicial positions. What this is all about is ends and means. Pursuing the nuclear option in this manner removes an important check on majority overreach. As Senator Vandenberg said, if a Senate majority decides to pursue its aims unrestrained by the rules, we will have sacrificed a professed vital principle for the sake of momentary convenience. Republicans have filibustered 3 eminently qualified nominees to the Circuit Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. They make no pretense of the argument that these nominees are unqualified. The mere nomination of qualified judges by this president, they say, qualifies as court packing. It is the latest attempt by Republicans, having lost 2 presidential elections, to seek preventing the duly elected president from fulfilling his constitutional duties. The thin veneer of substance laid over this partisan obstruction is the claim that the D.C. Circuit has too many judges. To be kind, this is a debatable proposition, one for which there is ample contrary evidence, and surely one that falls far short of the need to provoke a constitutional battle. Republicans know they cannot succeed in passing legislation to reduce the size of the court, so presented with a statutory and constitutional reality they do not like, they have decided to ignore that reality and have decided that they can obstruct the president's nominees for no substantive reason. So let nobody mistake my meaning. The actions of the Senate Republicans in these matters have been irresponsible. These actions put short-term partisan interest ahead of the good of the nation and the future of this Senate as a unique institution. And it is deeply dispiriting to see so many Republican colleagues who have in the past pledged to filibuster judicial nominees only in extraordinary circumstance engaged in such partisan gamesmanship. Whatever their motivations, the repercussions of their actions are clear. They are contributing to the destruction of an important check against majority overreach and to the frustration of those willing to break the rules, to change the rules. Those of us who are unwilling to do that have now seen it occur before our eyes when the chair was overruled earlier today. So why do I not join my Democratic colleagues in supporting the method by which they propose to change the rules? My opposition to the use of the nuclear option to change the rules of the Senate is not a defense of the current abuse of the rules. My opposition to the nuclear option is not new. When Republicans threatened in 2005 to use the nuclear option in a dispute over judicial nominees, I strongly opposed the plans, just as Senator Kennedy did, Senator Biden did, Senator Byrd did, and just about every Senate Democrat did, including Democrats still in the Senate today. Back then, Senator Kennedy called the Republican plan, quote, a preemptive nuclear strike, close quote. He said neither the Constitution, nor Senate rules, nor Senate precedents, nor American history provide any justification for selectively nullifying the use of the filibuster. Equally important, he said, neither the Constitution, nor the rules, nor the precedents, nor history provide any permissible means for a bare majority of the Senate to take that radical step without breaking or ignoring clear provisions of applicable Senate rules and unquestioned precedents, close quote. And here is what then Senator Biden said during that 2005 fight, quote, the nuclear option abandons America's sense of fair play. It's the one thing this country stands for, not tilting the playing field on the side of those who control and own the field. And he said, I say to my friends on the Republican side, you may own the field right now, but you won't own it forever. And he concluded, I pray to God, when the Democrats take back control, we don't make the same kind of naked power grab that you are doing. My position today is consistent with the position that I took then, that every Senate Democrat took then, and that's just back in 2005. And that was to preserve the rights of the Senate minority. I can't ignore that, nor can I ignore the fact that Democrats have used the filibuster on many occasions to advance or protect policies that we believe in. When Republicans controlled the White House, the Senate, and the House of Representatives from 2003 to 2006, it was a Democratic minority in the Senate that blocked a series of bills that would have severely restricted the reproductive rights of women. It was a Democratic minority in the Senate that beat back efforts to limit Americans' rights to seek justice in our courts when they're harmed by corporate or medical wrongdoing. It was a Democratic minority in the Senate that stopped the nominations of some to the federal courts who we believed would not provide fair and unbiased judgment. Without the protections afforded the Senate minority, total repeal of the estate tax would have passed the Senate in 2006. And we don't have to go back to 2006 to find examples of Senate Democrats using the rules of the Senate to stop passage of what many of us deem bad legislation. Just last year, these protections prevented adoption of an amendment that would have essentially prevented the EPA from protecting waters under the Clean Water Act. We stopped an amendment to allow loaded and concealed weapons on lands managed by the Army Corps of Engineers as a minority, with minority votes. With minority votes, we stopped legislation that would have allowed some individuals who are deemed mentally incompetent access to firearms. That's just the last year. Removing these minority protections risks that in the future, important civil and political rights might just disappear because a majority agree that they should. And let us not kid ourselves. The fact that we changed the rules today just to apply to judges and executive nominations does not mean the same precedent won't be used tomorrow or next year or the year after to provide for the end of a filibuster on legislation, on bills that are before us, and on amendments. Just as I've implored my Democratic colleagues to consider the implications of a nuclear option that would establish the precedent that a majority can change the rules at will, it is just as urgent for my Republican colleagues to end the abuse of the rules which allow extended debate that were intended on rules that were intended to be invoked rarely. Some of my Democratic colleagues may rightfully ask, if a Democratic majority cannot initially muster a supermajority to end filibusters or change the rules, then what can the majority do? The rules give us the path, and that is to make the filibusters filibuster. Let the majority leader bring nominations before the Senate. Let the Senate majority force the filibusters to come to the floor to filibuster. The current rules of the Senate allow the presiding officer to put the pending question to a vote when no senator seeks recognition. Let us, as the Senate majority, dedicate a week or a weekend or even a night to force the filibusters to filibuster. In 2010, in testimony before the Rules Committee on this subject, this is what Senator Byrd said. Does the difficulty reside in the construction of our rules, or does it reside in the ease of circumventing them? A true filibuster is a fight, not a threat, not a bluff. And then he said, now unbelievably, just the whisper of opposition brings the world's greatest deliberative body to a grinding halt. And then he said,